Welcome back to the 50 Chevy build. It's time we address the elephant in the room that I've been avoiding for quite some time now, so stick around. Well, the last round we whipped us up a set of stainless long tubes, and now we're shifting our focus on getting the cab back on this thing. Before we can do that, we've got a few issues to address here. I told the owner of the truck that there's no way it's leaving the shop in the condition it's in. It's just not safe, and putting all this effort and time into this build, and we can't leave it this way. So we'll get her up in the air. I'll show you what I mean. We'll start at the bottom and work our way up. So as you can see, there's been some sheet metal repair work done here. It's got aftermarket front floor pan sections, inner rocker panels, the cab mounts, and it's got these cap pieces, and the cowl's been replaced here, the outer and the inner, which is pretty typical on these trucks. As well as the cab corners here, you can see where they kind of lapped over here and here. So one of the first issues I saw right away is they did the outer cab corners, but they didn't bother to do it inner. You can see where it's lapped over right there. And comically, they took the old cab corner and tack welded it into here. This is painted green here. We'll get a better look at that after we cut that out. In addition to that, the cab supports aren't welded to the outer rocker. I mean, that's where all the structure of the cab is, so these cab mounts are just mounted to this floor pan, and that's it. So that's a safety issue in itself right there. And without having this inner rocker sealed up, I can put my hand right up in the cab. As you can see, I got a light up inside the cab there. And more of the same on this side. Cab support's completely rotted away. It's not attached to anything but the floor pan. And yeah, same deal. Can reach up inside the cab here. So what we got here is a classic example of stepping over $1 to save a dime. Got the parts to fix it right. That would have been really easy to fix this while this cab corner was cut off of here. I mean, everything would have been exposed all out in the open. Could welded everything in nice, and yeah, I'll stop there. So moving on ahead from the cab corners and cab mounts there, you see here they replaced the inner rocker here. And looks like they got it welded in good to the cab structure here, but there's only just a couple tacks along the top here. We need to do something about that. And they got it burned in here. Again, the inner rocker really isn't welded to the new floor pan structure. And as you can see where they tied into the existing floor panel, there's really no welding that took place there. And it's just kind of lapped over, and you can see there, you can see daylight up in the cab. And more of the same on this side. For some reason they left a flange here and cut the new panel and goober schnotted it back in there. And I don't know what the hell happened here, but as you can see as it comes forward, the rocker deviates from the floor pan. I can get my finger between here. So I don't know if they welded the cowl piece on too low and they had to try to match that up. Well, no, because this is all bent up here. I'm not sure what happened. This whole thing got welded on low, and they had to smash this to make everything line back up, which in turn put a big gap here, and it's just not good. And here's the big concern here is these front cab mounts. So that was what's holding the cab on. There's one tiny little tack weld here and one here. You run this truck into anything and the cab's gonna go tumbling off the thing. Both sides are like that. If that ain't scary, I don't know what is. And moving on to the toe boards here. See, they've got some sort of lovely patch just kind of goober schnotted in there. And they didn't bother to cut the old panel out, they just lapped it over. This new toe board goes all the way up to the bend here. And some more bizarre patching going on here. I'll also note that this fender filler panel is not welded, it's just rammed in there. And I'm really not upset about that, because now we can at least get in there and try to correct some of the fuckery here. We'll let her back down and give you a look on the inside. Moving inside the truck here. So, as I showed here, just kind of goober snotted that in. And there's just two little tack welds holding the floor pan to the inner rocker, or vice versa. And they've got it welded here. Got a hole there. And One lap patch on the outside here wasn't good enough, so we put one on the inside too, apparently. I had to cut that back to get a hold of that cab bolt. I just drilled a hole down in there and then held it with a punch so it wouldn't spin when I was taking the cab off. And up into them toe boards there, you can see what I mean, where they just lapped it over. And that's not welded in to speak of either. There's 4 sheet metal screws in it, and 1, 2, 3 tack welds. So, and on the other side, same song, different verse, less welding. And into the kick panels here, it's not welded, it's just laid over. There's 1 tack weld here. And if you peel this seal back, nothing's welded along this edge, so I don't know what the smashed in patch is doing here, but I don't know, something didn't come together for them here, and it's all wonky. This kick panel, they have at least got it plug welded in on this side, but it's all laid over the top of the other panel there. Man, this thing must have been just a rattle box to drive. And I can see outside where they have a big gap here, and it's not welded along here at all. I've got the vintage air unit mocked up in here. That's for another video. But before I pulled the old heater box out, they had nuts and bolts on here, and the nuts were on the back side, and there was no way to get between there. I spent hours trying to get the old heater box out here without cutting everything. I did have to cut a couple bolts. I got them all out, and they had the thing welded there in the corner too. So that was a huge pain. And I don't know what they had going on here, but it's like they welded it in and then bashed it all down. They got it bashed down a good ½ inch. I don't know what I'm going to do with that. Maybe nothing, but we're definitely going to cut and butt this seam here. We got this cut out for our 460E. We needed some more clearance there. I just blindly cut some clearance out in there because I knew this was a mess anyways. So we'll end up rebuilding some of this and probably cut this panel down here to close up these holes so we don't need them anymore. And to look in the back side here at the cab corners, looks like this one was done all right. They cut and butt this one. They didn't overlap it, but this side's overlapped like 6 inches. That's going to be a problem at some point. Unfortunately, I am not going to do a bunch of body work on this truck, so that's staying as is. And on this driver's cab corner, you can see a bunch of daylight between there where it's not welded. At least seam seal that or do something with it. And I don't know what happened here, but a big hole there. So our primary focus here, number 1, is to make this thing safe to drive so the cab isn't falling off of it. And number 2, to take care of all the rattles and wind leaks and all that type of stuff. And from what I've experienced from a few of the past projects, specifically Rogers 51 Bel Air, that thing didn't have any window felts in it and no door panels, like stripped out interior. And it really detracts from the driving experience when things are rattling and all you hear is road noise. Especially after all this effort with the suspension on this thing. We wanted to drive nice. So that's enough rambling. Let's jump into it. Alright, I'm getting irritated now. Woof, that thing was eating my lunch. What they had there is they've got the end of this pinched between the B-pillars right there in the new rocker. So they got it wedged in there and then welded in, so there's no way to cut that weld out of there. So I went up top and implemented a little RTR with the pry bar and a 4-pound maul. Rip, tear, and repair. I got those cab corners and mounts done, them holes sealed up. Now it's time to try to do something with this mess. Well, that kind of sucked. So I've been staring at this thing, trying to figure out where they went awry here with this gap. And I think I've got it figured out. If you look at these beads rolled into this kick panel piece here, these are supposed to line up with the notches in this inner fender closeout panel. So if this is in the right place, and this doesn't line up, that leads me to believe that this panel was welded in way too high. And if we take a look back inside the cab here, I'm seeing further evidence of that. This kick panel piece looks like this louver is supposed to be down here, so that's a solid 1/2 inch high. And looking at the floor pan here, if you look across, that one is flat across the top, and this one is kind of heading uphill. And see, this bead doesn't line up. Yeah, and that's because the whole floor pan is kicked up on this side. And see here, we're good back here, and we just welded across that seam. But it's slowly moving away here. You know, the gap's opening up. And that's probably why we've got all this extracurricular lapped patching going on here to try and close this back up after things went bad. And from up front here, you can pretty well see that this toe board here is flat in cab mount, and this one is heading uphill pretty good, like to the tune of about a 1/2 inch, which is about what we've got there on the end. So how are we going to try and recover from this here? Well, lucky for us, the center kick panel like pretty much wasn't welded at all. There was 2 or 3 tiny little tack welds with 0 penetration. See, I got my putty knife wedged in there holding it apart so you can see, but just a hammer and a putty knife, I popped those tack welds right off. So the game plan is to cut all these extra garbage patches out of here, and we'll get this extra lapped over steel cut off the firewall and attempt to lower this panel down where it belongs, and in turn lower that floor pan, get everything back where it's supposed to be. Probably be easier if this was just a rusted out cab and we were starting fresh with some new patch panels, but this is what we got to work with. Terrifying. Got that floor pan pushed down where I believe it belongs now, and all the features in the firewall started lining up. Like this dimmer hole, we're lined right up with that hole. The beads lined up, and also the starter button hole there. And you can see how much I've had to move it. I'm a little over a 1/2 inch here. About, I don't know, 3/8 there. And here I'm actually covering that tack. I had to go up on this end, so we had to twist that whole panel. They had this kick panel here mounted so high that they took this flange, it's supposed to be pointing down, they folded it around the top to try and bridge that gap that was here. And here's what was holding our cab mount on. One little goober snot weld there, and the tack on that side. don't know why they got this bolt sandwich between here. You can't. I had to drill a hole in the end of it to. I held it with a punch so it wouldn't spin on me. They had sandwich between there. It's supposed to go through the floorboard. Pretty sad state of affairs here again. Little 3/8 wide goober weld there and a tiny little shit tack here. Holding the whole cab mount in. No other welding anywhere else. So I'm not entirely sure what transpired here when they put this together, but what should be welded here, this lip to the inner cowl piece, is not welded at all. If you look at the bottom side of that floor pan, none of this is welded here. And they've got this inner rocker torched off. They torched about a 1/2 inch off the top. Why, I don't know. But same deal as the other side. The inner cowl piece is supposed to have a flanged 90 here to weld onto that. And the floor pan is supposed to weld on there first. But they've got that lip straightened out too. I didn't want to open this can of worms up any more than what we got, but I just can't leave it alone. How you do one thing is how you do everything. And that creates all the structure for this cab brace into the A-pillar post here. So we need to do something about that. And have a look inside here. See how hammered that floor is. And here's the flange where they bent it straight. You can see where the paint's missing. That's supposed to be bent down at a 90. And yeah, we're going to try and cut this whole works back out of here. There's just a few plug welds there. And I can cut them pretty easily with my spot welder. I think there's about a 1/2 inch of weld here I need to cut. And this here, and this all get replaced anyways because this is all rotten junk. And this is lapped over about 6 inches here, and nothing's welded. Same thing up on top here. So we can correct all this and attempt to make it right, or at least halfway right. About a day and a half later here, we got this side put back together. I didn't time lapse this because you already watched me do it on that side. Basically the same operation. I was able to hammer and dolly this out fairly flat. I mean, it's acceptable. The inner fender kind of covers all this anyway, so you'll never see that. But it's the thought that counts, right? And same as the other side, tied this piece back in there. So now we've got structure built back into here and then into the A-pillar. And I also added a little 90-degree piece here to repair that flange that they had torched off. But we got our cab mounts level and flat. Everything's looking good. I also jumped ahead and patched all these holes that were in the firewall here from the pedals and whatever else. All this area was rotten. That was all Swiss cheese here. We're going to hold off on patching those little corners in because, as you can see, I've got a little brainstorming going on with some chalk on the firewall here. We're going to end up replacing all this with a custom firewall, do some bead rolling. It's a lot easier just to replace the whole works than try to patch. I think I counted 60 holes that I would have to fill in. And also we need to stick the column back in here and get our exact height back on the chassis so we can clear headers and the engine and everything to get our column mount built. And then we can lay out what we need for tunnel clearance here. I would assume that this is going to get patched way into about here and here. I know the gas pedal sits about here, so this needs to be flat. So we'll get a test fit on the cab to the frame, to our drivetrain, and go from there. So we got the cab set back down on there. I did find some new bushings for those rear cab mount shackles, so I replaced them right away. And got the column mounted up in here. I got a swinging column bracket. I did have to drill and tap this for studs because these things always have the wrong bolt spread on them. So I got that put on there, my tilt column, and my floor plate here. I did have to cut out the top a little bit there to get that in there to set down flat. And we also got our CPP firewall mount brake master in here. I did have to bump that over like a 1/4 inch from what the instructions said so the brake pedal wouldn't hit the column. But see that circle I've got there? I 3D printed that. That's just to so I could drill a pilot hole, and then that larger circle keeps the rest of the assembly centered where it's supposed to be. Also got our steering shaft sorted here with the support bearing. Big gusset. I just got that stuff tacked for now. I don't want to get a bunch of weld spatter over our nice new headers, so we'll weld that out when the motor comes back out. And I don't know if it was in the previous video or the one before that. We thought we were going to have to do a notch here in the firewall to clear the coils, but this is all working out now because when we did the motor mount and the drive shaft, I kicked the motor head just a little bit to make our drive shaft work and made everything come together here. And now we're working on our trans tunnel here. I've got the original piece in here. We're going to end up cutting this bulge out and making it flat. And I got some paper in there as a pattern. I used a 5-gallon pail to trace that radius out. And looking about perfect. So I'm going to cap this in flat and draw this nice round portion back to this line here after we got this flattened out. On second thought, after I stopped recording and just looking at this, I think I'm going to cut this off right here and ditch all this and make that patch and where it transitions down to the flat all out of one piece. That'll save me a bunch of monkeying around cutting, and this up here doesn't really fit the existing floor pan that great anyways, so we're going to hack her off and probably weld that portion right into the truck. Alright, I hacked this panel off here and I scribed a line where that meets the floor there. And I've got my step dies loaded up in the bead roller. I'm going to step this flange upward this way, that way, because I smashed this little lip flat here. It'll bring this part of the floor pan back up flush with the rest of it, or else it'll be, whatever, an 1/8 inch low. So I'm going to roll a step around the edge there to bring her back up to the proper level. And there you have it. Got that panel set back in there after we bead rolled it. See, we just stepped it down because I flattened this little lip that was around the outside. So we can get this panel to sit flat down to the floor pan section because we're going to spot weld this in all the way around. And got this templated up. I'm also going to spot weld here. And we're going to cut and butt the rest of this here. And get a little dome piece going. And yeah, I think it's time to turn it into some steel. We got a couple beads rolled in that panel that really firmed it up. It was kind of flimsy before, and now it's rock solid. We're going to spot weld around this perimeter, like I said, and when we get up into this toe board area, we're just going to cut and butt this right in. There's no reason this cover needs to come off again. We're not dealing with no top loader anymore, and it really doesn't help you get at the bell housing bolts anyways. They're plenty easy to get at. So we can't weld this piece on until we've got this set in stone, because obviously the angle's going to change a little bit by the time we lay that down in there. And we've got a little bit of shape to match into up here, and we want to be able to get a clamp up in there and grip that together. And I don't want to do any sort of welding up over the top of them stainless headers, because those things attract weld spatter like it's going out of style. So we'll pull the cab back off. We've got all the information we needed with our test fit. So we'll get the cab back off and get this wrapped up. That toe board finished out, welded in, ground out, smoothed up. We did our welding on the outside so we could grind it smooth, because on the inside it's going to get sound deadener and nobody will ever see it again anyways. Also got these corners patched in to get us back up, transitioned into the flat of the firewall with some good steel. And here's how we're looking from the inside, our patchwork quilt we got going on here. But as I said, this will get sound deadened, so that's plenty well cleaned up for what we need. And to continue our sheet metal conquest here, onward and upward, we're gonna get this firewall taken care of. Like I said, there's 60 some holes in this thing. It's easier just to replace the whole works than to patch in all this crap. So we're gonna have to cut some spot welds. There's braces that run up the firewall here, and after we've got that cut out, we got to remember to fix these little areas where it's bashed up so I can get my hand back up in there with a hammer and dolly, because obviously there's no way to do that at this point. So let's get into it. motor out, blew all the suspension apart, got that stuff off of there so I could get in here and weld that brace on for the steering, and I also needed to weld out the motor mounts and get the stuff all painted up so we can put the cab back on for the final time. Crazy that we cut that much sheet metal off and didn't put that much back in. All that stuff was lapped over so badly. Well, that snowballed way out of control, as per usual. But hey, if you're in there that far, there's only one way to fix it, and that's the right way. It was not leaving the shop in that condition. I mean, liability issues, you name it. And that's just the type of thing you need to look out for when buying some of this old stuff. Just because they say the floor's been fixed or whatever, you really need to crawl around this stuff and have a good look at it. Luckily, the owner got a really good deal on this truck. If he had paid a premium for it and had that type of work done, well, yeah, it wouldn't be good. If you guys made it this far in the video, thanks a lot. I know this was a long one. In the next video, we're going to get into finishing this build out. I mean, we're getting close here now that we're basically done fabricating. So we'll get into final assembly and start knocking out some of the plumbing, wiring, fuel system, all that fun stuff. So we'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.